Okay, let's dive deep today into a crisis that's, well, really engulfing probably the most famous name in Formula One right now, Ferrari.
Yeah, and this isn't just about, a single bad race weekend.
No, not at all. The sources we're looking at suggest the problems are systemic, structural, really deep, and maybe the most surprising thing, the intense scrutiny is coming from inside the house, almost.
Well, yeah, from the one person they absolutely have to listen to, Lewis Hamilton. It's fascinating. He hasn't even officially pulled on the overalls yet, but he's already acting like an internal auditor almost.
Using that huge reputation he has to try and force some changes.
Exactly. And the big thing coming out of the Italian press reports we've seen is that he's produced a second detailed report.
Right, the first was about the car, the machine itself.
Yeah, the hardware. But this new one, it's aimed right at what seems to be their biggest weakness right now, how they actually operate at the track.
Highlighting this massive disconnect. It seems like what happens in the factory in Maranello isn't matching up with what happens on race weekends.
And you've got to put this in context, right? This is a team with, well, a heavy history. They haven't clinched a constructor's title since 2008.
That's a long time.
A really long time in F1 terms. So the failures aren't just technical glitches. It points to needing a whole change in mindset, in philosophy.
In the sources, they really hammer the issues right at the top, the management structure.
Yeah, talking about intense power struggles in politics. That's the phrase being used.
How can a high-tech team like that function properly if the leadership is busy with internal battles?
Well, it creates this culture of fear, almost, aversion to risk. If making a mistake could mean you're out politically, engineers get scared.
So they don't innovate. They play it safe.
Precisely. Innovation dies in that kind of environment. You need freedom, you need to allow for mistakes to find genius, but the structure there seems almost designed to punish risk. It's safer to stick with the conservative option than push boundaries and maybe get blamed.
The irony, though, when you look at the talent they've actually let go over the years.
Oh, it's staggering. World-class Italian engineers, people who could have and arguably should have built title-winning eras there.
Like Aldo Costa, you mean?
Yeah.
Went to Mercedes and was central to their dominance.
Exactly. Or Andrea Stella, now doing great things as team principal at McLaren. They leave Ferrari. And what happens? They won everything, as the reports put it. Why? Because they joined teams where they could actually use their talents without the political baggage.
And when things do go wrong at Ferrari, what's the default reaction based on these reports?
Deflection, the blame game. It seems instead of looking inward, the tendency is to point fingers. We saw it recently, didn't we? An attempt to pin the current car's issues on Enrico Cardile, the former technical director.
Yeah, but Cardile left. When was it? July last year.
Right, so he did the initial concept, sure, but how does his departure explain why the team seems incapable of advancing or developing the car through this whole current season? Development happens during the season, too.
So the timing doesn't quite add up if you're trying to blame him for this year's lack of progress.
No, it doesn't really stack up. The analysis from these internal sources seems to suggest blaming Cardile was, well, more of an excuse. A political move, maybe, to shift focus from those deeper, ongoing structural problems that stop them developing mid-season like their rivals do.
And those structural problems, that inability to adapt, that's why this whole Hamilton is savior narrative is so powerful, isn't it?
Totally. He's meant to be the superhero figure, and he's clearly not waiting around. He's got his large magnifying glass out, as they say, and he's pointing out exactly where things need fixing, starting with the car itself.
There was a first report, right? A couple of months back, all about the actual car.
Yes, almost entirely focused on the physical machine. He flagged major improvements needed in really fundamental areas. Brakes, for one. Especially engine braking.
Engine braking, that's super critical in these cars, right? For balance and stability.
Hugely critical. It helps settle the rear end when you're braking hard. If you can't get that right, the car becomes unpredictable going into corners, it upsets the balance, and it makes managing tire temperatures, well, incredibly difficult. He apparently demanded immediate work on that.
Okay, what else was in that first report?
Beyond brakes, issues with steering feel, suspension behavior, the overall setup possibilities, and maybe most critically, he apparently flagged the simulator.
The factory simulator, saying it wasn't accurate enough.
Essentially, yeah. Suggesting the correlation, between what the simulator in Maranello says and what actually happens on the real track. It isn't good enough. And if your simulator is effectively lying to you,
Then all that work is wasted, leads straight to the trackside problems.
Exactly. And he didn't just focus on parts, he called for better communication, more efficient ways of working together. It was pretty comprehensive on the hardware and system side.
So that first report was the technical deep dive, the nuts and bolts.
Yes. But this second report, the one causing the current stir, it shifts the focus completely. Away from the car design and onto the operations at the track.
Okay, this sounds critical, but before we dig into exactly how Ferrari's trackside operations are reportedly failing, we just wanted to quickly welcome you properly to the Draws Zone.
Yeah, great to have you with us.
If you're finding this deep dive interesting and maybe learning something new about the inner workings, do take a second to hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss out on any of our future analyses.
Okay, so back to that second report, operations.
Right. Why is this shift in focus so important right now?
Well, think about where we are in the regulation cycle. The field's incredibly tight. Those last few tenths of a second, they're often found in how well you optimize the car at the track.
Setup tuning during the weekend itself.
Exactly, and the sources are saying the Ferrari is known to be really sensitive to ride height. Just a tiny change, a millimeter here or there, can massively impact performance. But the reports claim the team consistently struggles to actually find that sweet spot during a race weekend.
And what's really damning, apparently, is the pattern of this failure.
Yeah, the reports detail this recurring theme. They show up at a track, the car seems to have a decent base setup from the simulator back at the factory. So the engineering concept isn't fundamentally flawed.
Oh.
But then they try to fine-tune it during free practice, make those small adjustments for the specific track conditions, and that's where it falls apart. They just can't seem to nail that optimal setup.
Which points back to that simulator correlation issue again, maybe? Or problems with trackside tools?
Could be either. Or both. If you can't trust your trackside measurements, or if the sim doesn't quite capture real-world things like wind shifts, track grip evolution, temperature changes, you're basically guessing when you try to fine-tune the setup. Flying blind.
And the reports cite specific races where this happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Concrete examples mentioned in the Italian press coverage include the Italian Grand Prix. Looked quick in practice, then just vanished in qualifying.
I remember that. Azerbaijan, too.
Azerbaijan, they apparently had a doublet in FP2, looked really strong, but then didn't really progress much further in quali or the race. And Singapore was another one, started okay in FP1, but then just fell away as the weekend went on.
That consistent drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
It really backs up the idea of an operational problem, not just a car problem.
And it ties directly into those reports of internal friction we heard about. Remember, after Singapore qualifying, that heated discussion reported between Vasseur, the team principal, and Matteo Tamninelli, the head of track engineering.
Yeah, driven by Leclerc's complaints.
Right, exactly. Leclerc was reportedly critical of how the car was being managed trackside. Now you have Hamilton arriving, and his independent analysis seems to be saying the exact same thing. It validates his future teammates' concerns.
So when you have the current driver, the future star driver, and even the team principal seemingly pointing fingers at the same area, trackside execution, you have to think it's more than just one person making mistakes.
It points towards something structural, doesn't it? And Hamilton's second report apparently gets really specific about the critiques.
Like what?
Management style described as excessively centralized, which means less flexibility, less ability to adapt quickly on the ground.
Less empowering the engineers at the track to make calls.
Seems like it. And linked to that, a reported incapacity to react quickly when things change or problems pop up during the weekend.
And that's where you see the contrast with rivals, right? You mentioned Mercedes earlier.
Yeah, look at Mercedes. Their car hasn't always been brilliant this year, but they snagged those wins in places like Canada and Singapore. How? By adapting really well mid-weekend. Making smart setup calls as conditions change, they seem proactive.
Whereas Ferrari, according to these reports,
reactive. The example given was around tire warming issues. Other teams facing similar problems were apparently trying things like using medium tires in qualifying sessions to gather data, to proactively find solutions. Ferrari, the report suggests, tends to wait and see what happens.
which sounds like that centralized control again. Maybe a fear of making the wrong call.
It fits the pattern, doesn't it? That fear of failure we talked about earlier, possibly stemming from the political culture.
Okay, so let's shift to that political fallout. This must be incredibly difficult for Hamilton personally.
Oh, you'd have to imagine so. Think about it. He arrives, likely expecting to be the catalyst for change, the savior figure, believing his input would be acted on immediately.
And instead,
He apparently walks into the very things he probably hoped his arrival would help fix. Internal politics, these power struggles, a structure that's just full of friction, as the reports put it.
that's got to be a shock coming from Mercedes.
A massive psychological adjustment, surely. At Mercedes, he likely had implicit trust in the team's processes. Now, reports suggest he's having to fight the bureaucracy just to get fundamental operational improvements pushed through, finding his requests are going unfulfilled.
Having to battle just for basic changes, that must be hugely frustrating for a driver wanting to focus on winning.
Absolutely. You want your driver focused on extracting performance, not fighting internal battles before he's even raced the car.
So what does this mean for the immediate future if Hamilton's frustrated and these reports are out there?
Well, the operations team is going to be under a microscope, starting right away at the U.S. Grand Prix. And it's not just internal pressure. Rumors are already swirling about potential personnel changes by the end of this year.
People might lose their jobs over this.
That's the suggestion, backed up by reports that many valuable technicians have actually already abandoned the trackside team recently. More departures might follow.
And what about Vasseur, the team principal? He brought Hamilton in.
He's under immense pressure now. Hamilton's reports essentially put him on the clock. Plus, you have these other reports coming out of Italy suggesting the crucial 2026 engine project, the next big rules change, already has reliability worries.
Oh, wow. So if the 2026 car, under Vasseur's watch, also fails,
Then all the blame lands squarely on him. His excuses are running out, as one report put it, starting the next big regulation era badly. That could very well mean the end of his tenure.
which leads us inevitably to those other rumors, the Christian Horner ones.
Yes, the elephant in the paddock, maybe.
Yeah.
Horner recently let go from his previous role. Could he realistically end up at Ferrari maybe by the middle of next year?
The timing is convenient, shall we say.
Very suggestive. Mid-next year is precisely when Ferrari will have a clear picture of whether their 2026 car concept is working and if those engine reliability issues are sorted.
So if the 2026 project looks like a dud,
The cert could be out, and Horner is reportedly available and potentially interested.
is there a specific reason why they might want Horner, according to these sources, beyond just needing a change?
There is. It apparently boils down to Ferrari's difficult relationship with the FIA, the governing body. They face frequent investigations, which reportedly makes them overly conservative in their designs. They're afraid of pushing the limits because they fear pushback.
So they need someone to handle the politics better.
They need a shark. That's the reported term. Horner is seen as someone who could fundamentally change that dynamic, manage the relationship with the rulemakers, effectively distance the FIA from their garage, allow them to be more aggressive, less timid in their designs.
Okay, but let's pause there. Horner and Hamilton working together,
Yeah.
given their history. That sounds explosive.
It does, doesn't it? And the sources acknowledge that. It seems like a volatile mix.
So is this Horner talk real? Or maybe just Vasseur trying to buy himself time, distract from the current problem?
That's a fair question. But the sources reporting this suggest Ferrari might be desperate enough to risk it. They quote the old F1 adage. Worse things have been seen in the past when teams are desperate for titles. The potential prize fixing the culture might seem worth the risk of fireworks between the boss and the star driver.
So wrapping this all up then, what's the big picture takeaway for someone following this?
I think it shows the crisis at Ferrari is incredibly deep, right? It runs from the very top, the political struggles, all the way down to basic execution at the racetrack. Hamilton's two reports really map that out perfectly. You have talent, you have resources.
But it's being neutralized by this institutional stiffness, this internal politics. Solutions don't seem easy or quick, despite all the rumors.
Exactly. And for you listening, it's a fascinating case study, isn't it? How even vast resources and arguably the greatest driver talent ever can be stalled by a rigid structure and, well, a destructive internal culture. Money and genius aren't enough if the philosophy is broken.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
I think so.
If Lewis Hamilton, maybe the most strategically astute driver we've ever seen, someone who knows intimately how a winning machine like Mercedes operated, if he can't force fundamental structural change at Ferrari, does that mean their political culture is just immune? Is it fundamentally resistant to reform from the outside?
Are they just doomed to repeat this cycle over and over? That's the big question hanging over them now, isn't it? Something to watch very closely in the coming months and years.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive today.
Pleasure.
And remember, if you want more in-depth analysis like this on the biggest stories in racing, make sure you subscribe to the Drone Zone. We'll see you next time.